You don't win against me, he said quietly, like it wasn't a warning but a law. The room didn't react. It never did when Adrian Volkov spoke. Conversations softened. Glasses paused midair. Even the dealers seemed to breathe slower, like the air itself belonged to him. I wasn't supposed to be there. That was the first mistake. My shift had ended 40 minutes ago, and the only reason I stayed was because one of the terminals glitched again. The system lagged for half a second every few hands, subtle enough that most people wouldn't notice, but I did. I always noticed patterns. It was how I survived. I stood behind the velvet rope, tablet in hand, pretending to run diagnostics while the real game unfolded at the private table. This wasn't the main casino floor. This was where money stopped feeling like money and started feeling like power. $200 million sat on that table tonight. Not in chips, not in cash, just understood. Adrian didn't look at his cards. He never did. He looked at people, at their hands, their breathing, the slight hesitation before a move. That's how he won. Every time. I had heard stories before I ever saw him. That he built his empire without raising his voice. That he didn't need threats because people made better decisions when they were afraid on their own. But stories didn't prepare you for presence. He wasn't loud. He wasn't flashy. He just existed like gravity. And everything else adjusted around him. The man across from him folded. Didn't even try to hide the defeat. Adrian didn't smile. He just tapped the table once, slow, controlled, like closing a chapter that was already written. Next, he said. That's when it happened. The glitch. Half a second. The system stuttered, just enough for the display to flicker. No one else reacted, but I saw it. The probability feed recalibrated wrong. A tiny miscalculation. Invisible unless you knew where to look. My fingers moved before I could stop them. I stepped forward, past the rope. Wait. The word slipped out. Soft. Wrong. The kind of word that didn't belong in a room like this. Every head turned. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just enough. Adrian looked at me for the first time, and everything in me went still. His eyes weren't cold. That would have been easier. They were focused. Precise. Like I was a detail he hadn't accounted for yet. You interrupted my table, he said. No anger. Just fact. I swallowed. Your system's off by 0.3%, I said, holding the tablet tighter than I should have. The recalculation is wrong. Silence stretched. Not awkward. Just heavy. One of the men beside him shifted slightly, like he was about to step in, but Adrian lifted a finger. Barely. The movement stopped everything. And you are? He asked. Naomi Carter. My voice didn't shake. I made sure of that. His gaze dropped to the tablet, then back to me. Measuring. Calculating. You're saying my system is wrong, he said. I nodded once. Yes. A pause. Then something changed. Not in the room. In him. Subtle. Like interest replacing indifference. Adrian leaned back in his chair, slow, deliberate, like he had all the time in the world. Then sit, he said, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. My heart skipped. Just once. But I didn't move. Sir, I'm not a player. His lips curved slightly. Not a smile. Something sharper. You are now. The dealer hesitated. The entire table seemed to hold its breath again. Adrian's eyes never left mine. Beat me, he said, voice low enough that it felt personal, and $200 million is yours. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They landed. Heavy. Final. Like gravity, shifting direction. I looked at the chair, then back at him. Everyone in that room expected me to hesitate, to back down, to remember where I stood in the hierarchy of things. But I didn't look at the money. I looked at him, and for the first time that night, I saw it. Not power. Not control. A pattern. And patterns could be broken. The chair felt heavier than it looked. Not because of the leather or the design, but because of what it meant. People did not sit across from Adrian Volkov unless they already understood they were going to lose. I pulled it back anyway. Slow. Controlled. Every movement deliberate, like I had practiced this moment even though I had not. The dealer glanced at Adrian. Just a flicker. Waiting for confirmation. Adrian gave a small nod, and the game reset like nothing had happened. Cards moved. Chips aligned. The system corrected itself in the background, but I could still feel the echo of that glitch, like a whisper only I could hear. You said 0.3%. Adrian said, his voice calm, almost curious. That is a very specific accusation. I placed the tablet down beside me. It is not an accusation, I replied. It is a pattern. His eyes narrowed slightly. Not in anger. In focus. Explain. The dealer paused, mid-shuffle. Adrian did not even look at him. Continue, he said, and the cards began to move again, smooth and precise. I leaned forward just enough to see the table clearly, but not enough to seem aggressive. Your system recalculates probability after every hand, I said, but it overcorrects when the data shifts too quickly. It tries to stabilize instead of adapt. Adrian's fingers tapped once against the table. And that means it predicts behavior based on what already happened, not what is about to happen. I met his gaze. You rely on it to confirm your instincts. A small silence followed. Not the heavy kind, the sharp kind, the kind that cut. One of the men behind him shifted again, but this time Adrian did not stop him. He just watched me. Careful, Adrian said quietly. You are starting to sound like you think you can read me. I did not smile. I do not need to read you, I said. You follow the same rule every time. His eyebrow lifted slightly. Which is? I exhaled slowly. You let people think they have a chance. The dealer finished the shuffle. Cards were dealt. 2 to him. 2 to me. I did not look down immediately. Neither did he. The room had gone still again, but this time it felt different. Not because of him. Because of me. Adrian glanced at his cards for half a second. That was all he needed. Then his attention returned to me, steady, unbroken. I picked mine up. The numbers did not matter yet. What mattered was rhythm. Timing. The way his fingers rested on the edge of the table. The slight pause before he breathed in. He was waiting, not for the cards. For me. You are hesitating, he said. I set my cards back down. No, Evroplia. I'm letting you think I am. Something flickered in his expression. Not surprise. Recognition. The first crack. Small. Almost invisible. But it was there. He leaned back slightly, studying me like a problem that had just become interesting. Most people play the game, Adrian said. You are trying to change it. I tilted my head. No, I said softly. I'm just not playing your version. The dealer cleared his throat quietly, unsure who to follow. Adrian did not look away from me. Proceed, he said. I placed my bet. Not large, not small, just enough to exist. Adrian mirrored it instantly, without hesitation. Of course he did. He always matched before he raised. Pattern. Predictable. Safe. The cards turned. Not in my favor. Not yet. But I did not react. I let the moment sit. Let the silence stretch just enough to make it uncomfortable for everyone else. Not for him. Not yet. But it would be. You are not reacting, Adrian observed. Neither are you, I said. His lips curved again, that same almost smile that never quite reached his eyes. Because I already know how this ends. I leaned forward slightly, just enough to close the distance by an inch. That is your first mistake, I said. The air shifted. Not dramatically, but enough. Enough for him to feel it. Enough for him to realize something had changed. Adrian looked at the table, then back at me, slower this time. More deliberate. And for the first time since I sat down, he did not speak immediately. He was thinking, not calculating. Thinking. There is a difference. And that was when I knew. I did not need better cards. I did not need better odds. I just needed him to stop being certain. Because the moment Adrian Volkov questioned himself was the moment the game stopped belonging to him. The next hand did not start immediately. That was the first disruption. Adrian Volkov never delayed a game. Not for anyone. Not for anything. But now, his fingers rested lightly on the edge of the table, still, as if he was recalibrating something that had nothing to do with cards. I did not move. I did not rush. Silence, when used correctly, is not empty. It is pressure. Deal, Adrian said finally, his voice even, but slower than before. The dealer obeyed instantly, though I caught the slight hesitation in his hands. Cards slid across the table. Clean. Precise. Familiar. Adrian glanced at his hand, but this time, it lasted a fraction longer than before. Almost unnoticeable. Almost. I watched his eyes instead of the cards. That was where the truth lived. I lifted mine, just enough to see the numbers. Not strong. Not weak. Balanced. The kind of hand that depended on the player, not the luck. Perfect. Adrian placed his bet first. Larger this time. Not aggressive. Just intentional. A shift in tone. He was no longer demonstrating control. He was testing it. I matched without hesitation. No pause. No calculation. Just movement. His gaze sharpened. You are adapting quickly, he said. I tilted my head slightly. No, rápida. I am staying consistent. Another small silence. This one different. The room was no longer watching him. They were watching us. The center of gravity had shifted, even if no one said it out loud. The dealer revealed the next card. Adrian's fingers tapped once, then stopped. That tap again. The same rhythm. The same tell. Subtle. Controlled. But it was there. I leaned back slightly, mirroring his posture from earlier. Not copying. Echoing. Enough for him to notice. You do that when you are unsure, I said softly. One of the men behind him exhaled sharply, but Adrian did not react to him. His eyes stayed on me. I'm never unsure, he said. I held his gaze. That is your second mistake. The air tightened. Not loud. Not visible. But present. Adrian looked down at the table again, then back at me, slower this time. Measuring something new. Not the game. Me. You think this is about the cards, he said. It is never about the cards, I replied. His almost smile returned, but there was something different beneath it now. Not amusement. Not entirely. Interest. Real interest. Then what is it about, Naomi Carter? The way he said my name was deliberate. Testing how it felt. I did not look away. Control, I said. And who was losing at first? The next card turned. The balance shifted. Slightly in his favor. The room relaxed just a little. Familiar territory returning. Adrian noticed it. Of course he did. You see, he said quietly. Patterns correct themselves. I shook my head once. Only if you let them. I pushed my chips forward. A raise. Not reckless, but enough to force a response. The dealer froze for half a second before looking at Adrian. Everything depended on him again. That was the illusion. Adrian did not move immediately. That was the difference. He looked at the chips, then at me, then at his hand. A sequence. New. Unfamiliar. He was thinking again. Not calculating. Thinking. I could feel it. That subtle shift where certainty begins to fracture. You are trying to make me hesitate, he said. I exhaled slowly. No, I said. I'm showing you that you already are. His jaw tightened. Just slightly. Enough. Enough for me to see it. Enough for him to realize I saw it. The moment stretched. Longer than before. Longer than he would have ever allowed. Until now. Finally, Adrian matched the race. But it was not automatic. It was chosen. That was the difference. And choices can be influenced. The final card had not been revealed yet, but it did not matter. Not anymore. Because the game had already shifted. Not on the table. In him. Adrian leaned forward slightly, closing the distance by an inch. His voice dropped, quieter, more personal. You are dangerous, he said. I met his gaze without flinching. No, Lydia. I'm just paying attention. And for the first time that night, Adrian Volkov did not respond right away. Not because he had nothing to say, but because he was listening. The final card had not been turned, but no one in the room was looking at the deck anymore. They were watching Adrian, waiting for him to reclaim control, waiting for the inevitable correction, the moment where everything snapped back into place and the story returned to something familiar. But it did not. Adrian's fingers hovered just above the table, not touching, not tapping, suspended like he was deciding whether the next move belonged to him or to something else entirely. I stayed still. Stillness is not passive. It is a choice. Finish it, Adrian said quietly to the dealer. The card turned. The numbers settled into place. The room exhaled, but not in relief. In confusion. It was close. Too close. The kind of outcome that did not resolve itself immediately. The kind that demanded interpretation. Adrian looked at the table, then at me, then back at the table again. That sequence again. That new pattern. He was checking twice now. Verifying. That had not been part of him before. Interesting, he said under his breath, but it was not directed at anyone else. It was for himself. I did not look at my cards right away. I let the silence stretch just a second longer than comfortable. Then I reached forward and turned them over. Not dramatically, just enough. The numbers aligned. Not overwhelmingly, but enough. Enough to tilt the outcome. Enough to make the difference undeniable. The dealer froze. Just for a moment. His eyes moved between the table and Adrian, waiting for confirmation of what was already clear. Adrian did not speak. Not immediately. He leaned back slowly, his gaze fixed on the cards like they were something unfamiliar. Something that had just stopped obeying him. The room held its breath. This was not about the money anymore. It had not been for a while. This was about something far more fragile. Certainty. Adrian finally looked up at me. Not through me. Not past me. At me. And for the first time, there was no script behind his eyes. No predetermined outcome. Just attention. Real, unfiltered attention. You knew, he said. It was not a question. I shook my head once. No, Irovia. I made you think I did. Another silence. Longer this time. He studied me like he was rewriting something in real time. Something he had believed for years without ever needing to question it. You guided the game, Adrian said slowly. You did not play it. I leaned back slightly, mirroring him again, closing the loop. You gave me the structure, I said. I just showed you where it breaks. One of the men behind him shifted, clearly uncomfortable now, but Adrian did not acknowledge it. He was still looking at me, still holding that moment like it mattered more than anything else in the room. The dealer cleared his throat softly. Sir, the result? Adrian did not look at him. Not yet. His eyes remained locked on mine, measuring something that had nothing to do with the table anymore. Then, finally he spoke. She wins. The words landed quietly. No drama. No resistance. Just acceptance. But the impact was immediate. The room shifted, not loudly, not visibly, but completely. Adrian Volkov had just acknowledged a loss. Not just an outcome. In control. I did not move. I did not celebrate. That would have been the wrong move. Instead, I watched him. Because this was the real moment. Not the win. The aftermath. Adrian exhaled slowly, almost imperceptibly, like releasing something he had been holding on to for far too long. Then he leaned forward, again closing the distance just enough to change the air between us. You said patterns can be broken, he said quietly. I met his gaze. They can. His lips curved slightly, but this time was not sharp, not controlled. It was something else, something closer to respect or recognition. No, Adrian said, his voice lower now, more personal than before. You did not break the pattern. He paused, just long enough to make the words land. You changed it. And in that moment, it was clear. He had not lost $200 million. He had lost something far more dangerous. The belief that he could not. No one reached for the chips. Not the dealer. Not the men standing behind Adrian. Not even me. The money sat there, untouched, like it had suddenly become irrelevant. Because it had. Adrian Volkov did not move right away. He did not look at the table again. He did not acknowledge the result a second time. Instead, he stood, slowly, deliberately, the kind of movement that usually meant the end of something. Chairs shifted quietly as the room adjusted to him. But this time, the adjustment felt uncertain, not automatic. He walked around the table, not rushing, not hesitating, until he stood beside me, close enough that I could feel the presence without needing to look up. I stayed seated. That was the second disruption. Most people would have stood, would have tried to match his height, his authority, his space. I did not. I kept my hands resting lightly on the table, calm, controlled, like the game had not just changed everything. Stand, one of the men behind him said quietly, almost instinctively. Adrian lifted a hand. Barely. The man fell silent immediately. Adrian did not look at him. His attention remained on me. You are comfortable, Adrian said. It was not criticism. It was observation. I turned my head slightly to meet his gaze. I am aware, I replied. His eyes held mine for a moment longer than before, studying, recalibrating, like I was no longer a variable in his system, but something separate from it entirely. Most people will be asking for the money, he said. I glanced at the table, at the chips, at the number that would change most lives instantly. Then I looked back at him. Most people came here for that, I said. I did. Not. Another pause. This one quieter, more focused. Adrian tilted his head slightly, like he was adjusting to a new angle he had never needed before. Then why are you here, Naomi Carter? The way he said my name again, slower this time, made it feel less like a question and more like a recognition. I exhaled softly. Because your system was wrong, I said, and no one told you. A faint shift crossed his expression. Not offense. Something closer to understanding. People do not correct me, Adrian said. They adapt. I nodded once. That is why they lose. Silence followed. But this time it was not heavy. It was clear, like something had been stripped away, leaving only what mattered. Adrian stepped closer. Not invading. Not forcing. Just enough to close the distance between us by a few inches. And you, he asked quietly, you do not adapt. I held his gaze without hesitation. No, I said. I observe. Then I decide. His lips curved again, but this time it was different. Not sharp. Not controlled. There was something almost genuine beneath it. You decided to challenge me, he said. I shook my head slightly. No, Irabia. You challenged me. That landed. Not loudly, but clearly. Adrian looked at me for a long moment, then glanced briefly at the table, at the untouched chips, before returning his focus to me. Take it, he said finally. The offer was simple, direct. $200 million, sitting within reach. I did not move. No, I said. The word did not echo. It did not need to, but it changed the room more than anything else had that night. One of the men behind him shifted again, this time unable to hide the reaction, but Adrian did not stop him. He was watching me too closely now. You refuse, Adrian said, quieter than before. Not disbelief. Clarification. I nodded. It was never about the money. Another pause. Longer. Deeper. Adrian studied me, like he was trying to understand something that did not fit into any framework he had built. Then what do you want? He asked. I leaned back slightly, finally shifting my posture, not away from him, but into myself. Nothing from you, I said. Just the truth. His eyes narrowed slightly. Not defensive. Focused. And what truth is that? I met his gaze, steady, unflinching. That you're not. Unbeatable, I said. The air shifted again, but this time it did not tighten. It opened. Adrian exhaled slowly, almost like a quiet release. And for the first time since I'd seen him, he did not look like a man controlling a room. He looked like a man reconsidering it. No, he said softly, more to himself than to me. Then his eyes returned to mine, sharper now, but not in the same way as before. Not unbeatable, he repeated. A pause. Then, quieter, almost like a realization, settling into place, just unchallenged. And in that moment, something changed again. Not the game. Not the room. Him. The room did not return to normal. It cannot. Something invisible had shifted, and everyone felt it, even if they could not name it. Adrian Volkov stood there closer than before, but no longer towering in the same way. Power had not left him. It had simply changed shape. I rose from the chair slowly, not because he expected it, but because the moment had reached its natural end. Standing now felt like balance, not submission. Our eye level aligned, just enough to remove the last illusion of distance. He noticed. Of course he did. You walk away from $200 million, Adrian said, his voice quieter now, less like a command and more like a thought spoken out loud. Most people would call that irrational. I adjusted the sleeve of my jacket, grounding myself in something simple, something real. Most people were not sitting here, I replied. His gaze did not waver. No, he said. They were not. Silence followed again, but this time it felt different. Not like pressure, not like tension, like space. Space where something new could exist. Adrian glanced briefly at the table, at the untouched chips, then back at me, as if confirming that they truly meant nothing in this moment. You corrected my system, he said. You corrected me. I shook my head once. I showed you the gap, I said. You decided to see it. That landed deeper than anything else I'd said. I could tell by the way his expression shifted, not outwardly, but internally, like something was settling into place behind his eyes. People do not usually get a second conversation after a moment like this, Adrian said. There was no threat in it, just truth. I nodded. I am not asking for one. Another pause. Shorter this time. Cleaner. Adrian stepped back half an inch. It was subtle, but it mattered. It was the first time he had created distance instead of closing it. And yet, he said slowly, "You are still here." I met his gaze. For now, his lips curved again, but there was no edge to it anymore. "You are not afraid," he said. It was not a question. I considered that for a second, not rushing to answer. "I understand what I'm looking at," I said. "That is different." Adrian studied me carefully, like he was measuring the weight of that statement against everything he knew. "And what are you looking at?" he asked. I did not look away. "A man who built certainty," I said, "and just found out it has limits." The words did not challenge him. They defined him. That was the difference. Adrian exhaled slowly, almost like he was letting something go, something he had carried for longer than he realized. "Limits are useful," he said quietly. "They show you where to grow." I nodded once. "If you accept them." Another silence. But now it felt aligned. Not opposing. Not competing. Just two perspectives existing in the same space without needing to dominate it. One of the men behind him shifted, stepping forward slightly as if to remind Adrian of the world outside this moment, the structure waiting to reassert itself. Adrian did not look back. Not immediately. His focus remained on me. "Naomi Carter," he said, my name slower this time, more deliberate, like he was committing it to memory rather than testing it. "You disrupted something that has not been touched in years." I held his gaze. Then maybe it needed to be. His expression softened just slightly, enough to make it real. "Maybe it did," he said. Then, finally, he turned his head, acknowledging the presence behind him with a single glance. The room shifted again, tried to recalibrate around him, but it was not as seamless as before. It would not be. Not tonight. Adrian looked back at me one last time, his voice lower now, almost private despite the room around us. "You said you wanted nothing," he said. I nodded. "I meant it." He studied me for a moment longer, then gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Not agreement. Recognition. That makes you the most valuable person in this room," he said quietly. I did not respond. I did not need to, because we both understood what he meant. Value, without attachment. Power, without needing to prove it. And for the first time that night, Adrian Volkov did not try to control the outcome. He let the moment end on its own terms. And that was something new. The moment should have ended there. Clean. Complete. A closed chapter. But did not. Because rooms like this do not forget disruption. They study it, replicate it, or eliminate it. I turned slightly, just enough to step away from the table, but not enough to break the awareness of everything behind me. The velvet rope was still there. The system was still running. The world Adrian Volkov controlled had not disappeared. It had only paused. "You are leaving," Adrian said. Not a question, just an observation placed into the air between us. I stopped, but I did not turn back immediately. That was intentional. Timing matters more after the game ends than during it. "Yes," I said simply. A quiet shift moved through the room again. Not dramatic, but noticeable. People expected something else. A negotiation, a follow-up, a consequence. Instead, I took one more step toward the rope. "Naomi," my name again. This time it carried something different. Not testing, not claiming, calling. I turned then, slowly, meeting his eyes across the space that had changed shape entirely. Adrian had not moved from where he stood, but his presence felt repositioned. Not diminished, just no longer centered in the same way. "You said you wanted nothing," he said. I nodded once. I meant it. He held my gaze, steady, but there was a new layer now. Not control. Curiosity. "People who want nothing are difficult to place," Adrian said. "They do not follow the rules." I allowed a small pause before answering. "That is because they are not playing the same game." His lips curved slightly again, but this time there was no sharpness behind it. No calculation trying to catch up. Just recognition. And yet, he said, "You understood mine better than anyone in this room." I did not deny it. Understanding does not mean belonging, I replied. That landed. Not as resistance. As definition. Adrian took a step forward. Just one. Measured. Not closing the distance completely. Just enough to show intention without forcing it. What you did tonight, he said quieter now, will not stay contained to this table. I knew that. Of course I did. Moments like this ripple. They do not disappear. It does not need to, I said. It already happened. His gaze sharpened slightly, but not in the way it had before. Not predatory. Focused. And you're comfortable with that? He asked. I met his eyes without hesitation. I'm comfortable with what is true. Another pause. This one steadier. Less fragile. Adrian studied me like he was placing something in a space he had never needed before. Not an opponent. Not an asset. Something else entirely. You changed the outcome, he said. I shook my head slightly. No, Envia. I revealed it. His expression shifted again, almost imperceptibly, but enough to make the difference real. There is a difference, he said. There is, I agreed. Silence followed, but it was no longer heavy. It was understood. One of the men behind him stepped closer again, more confident this time, as if the structure of the room was trying to rebuild itself. Adrian did not stop him immediately. He let the movement exist. Then, with a single glance, he redirected it. Not forcefully, naturally. The man stepped back. That control was still there. It had not left him. It had just evolved. Adrian looked back at me, his voice lower now, almost like the room no longer mattered. You walk away, he said. No deal. No agreement. No attachment. I nodded once. That is the point. He held that for a second longer, then exhaled slowly, like accepting something he had not expected to encounter. Most people spend their lives trying to get closer to this table, he said. I glanced briefly at the chips, still untouched, then back at him. That is why they never see beyond it. The words settled between us. Clear. Final. Adrian did not argue. He did not correct. He simply absorbed it. Then, after a moment, he gave a small nod. Not approval. Not dismissal. Recognition again. If you ever choose to return, he said quietly, it will not be as someone passing through. I considered that for a fraction of a second, then shook my head gently. I do not return to places that already revealed everything they have, I said. His gaze held mine, and, for the first time, there was no attempt to change that answer. No need, just acceptance of it. I turned then, stepping past the rope, back into the space where I had started. The system, the terminals, the world that functioned on patterns people rarely questioned. Behind me, the room began to move again. Slowly, carefully, but not the same way as before. It would not be the same again, because Adrian Volkov had not just been challenged. He had been seen. And once something is seen clearly, it cannot return to being invisible. The air outside the private floor felt different. Not lighter, just honest. The noise of the main casino returned in layers. Chips clinking, quiet conversations, the soft hum of machines cycling through probabilities that most people never questioned. I stepped behind the terminal I had left earlier, the screen still open, the system still running as if nothing had shifted. But it had. I could feel it. Not in the code. In the people. Word travels fast in places like this. Not through announcements. Through glances. Through the way conversations pause for half a second longer than usual when someone walks by. I did not look back toward the private room. I did not need to. Presence lingers even when you leave it behind. You are still here. The voice came from my left, low, controlled, familiar now in a way it had not been an hour ago. I did not turn immediately. I finished typing the correction into the system, letting the update process completely before I acknowledged him. Precision matters. Then I looked up. Adrian stood just outside the boundary of the velvet rope, not inside, not reclaiming the space that had once been around him. That was new. So are you, I said. His gaze moved briefly over the terminal, the interface, the lines of data scrolling in quiet rhythm. You fixed it, he said, not asking, confirming. I nodded once. It was not complicated. His eyes returned to mine. It was ignored, he corrected. A small pause followed. Not tension. Recognition again. Why come down here? I asked. You do not usually leave the room. Adrian's lips curved slightly. You do not usually walk away from it. That was fair. I accepted that with a slight tilt of my head. He stepped closer, but still did not cross the invisible line that separated his world from mine. That line mattered now. You changed something tonight, Adrian said. Not just at the table. I leaned lightly against the edge of the terminal, grounding myself in something physical. Change does not belong to me, I said. It happens when something true becomes visible. His gaze sharpened slightly, but not in the old way. There was no need to assert anything anymore. And now that it is visible, he asked. I held his gaze. You decide what to do with it. Silence stretched between us, but it was not empty. It was full of possibility, of directions not yet chosen. Adrian glanced briefly around the main floor, at the people moving through patterns they believed they controlled. Most of them will never notice, he said. I followed his gaze for a second, then looked back at him. They're not supposed to. Another pause. He understood that. Of course he did. Adrian shifted his weight slightly. Something subtle, almost human in its simplicity. You said you would not return, he said. I nodded once. I meant it. His eyes searched mine, not for weakness, not for contradiction, but for consistency. And yet, he said, you are still standing here. I exhaled softly. This is where I started, I replied. Not where I stay. That landed. Clean. Clear. Adrian looked at the terminal again, then back at me, as if connecting two versions of the same moment. You operate inside the system, he said, but you're not defined by it. I gave a small nod. Neither are you. That shifted something. Not outwardly. Internally. He did not respond right away. He considered it. We both knew the difference between knowing something and accepting it. Finally, Adrian stepped back half an inch. Again, that same movement. Space, not control. If I had met you anywhere else, he said quietly, this conversation would have been different. I tilted my head slightly. No, I said, you would have been. His lips curved again, but there was no edge, no calculation trying to catch up. Just acknowledgement. Perhaps, he said. The noise of the casino continued around us, unchanged on the surface, but altered beneath it in ways no one could measure. Adrian looked at me one last time, steady, present, not trying to hold the moment, just witnessing it. You did not take the money, he said. I shook my head. It would have changed the wrong thing. A quiet understanding passed between us. Not agreement, not alignment, just clarity. Adrian gave a small nod, then turned, not abruptly, not dramatically, but with intention, walking back toward the space he had come from. The private room, the structure, the world that now knew it could be seen differently. I watched him go for a second, then turned back to the terminal, to the system, to the patterns that still ran beneath everything. But now, they felt different. Not because they had changed, because I had shown that they could. And somewhere behind me, a man who had never needed to question anything had started to. Nothing dramatic marked the end of that night. No alarms, no applause, no final declaration that something irreversible had happened. The casino floor kept moving, just like it always did, as if the world preferred continuity over truth. I finished the last system check, watching the numbers stabilize, the probabilities align back into something predictable. Clean, controlled, almost perfect, almost. I logged out of the terminal, the screen dimming as if it, too, understood the moment was over. My reflection flickered briefly across the dark glass. For a second, I did not see a dealer or a technician or someone passing through system. I saw someone who had stepped outside of it. And then the reflection disappeared. I stepped away. The walk toward the exit felt longer than it should have. Not because of distance, but because of weight. Not heavy, just aware. Every step echoed slightly against polished floors, each sound grounding me back into a world that had not changed, even though something inside it had. The doors slid open, and the night air met me without hesitation. Cool, quiet, real, no verbitropes, no calculati silence, just the city breathing on its own terms. I paused for half a second on the sidewalk, not to look back, but to let the shift settle completely. Behind me, Adrian Volkov's world continued. Structured, controlled, but no longer unquestioned. I started walking. No destination. Just forward. That was enough. Somewhere above, in a room lined with glass and shadows, a man stood in a space he had never truly seen before. Not because it was new, because he was. Adrian did not return to the table immediately. The chips remained where they were, untouched, a quiet reminder that not everything valuable could be claimed. He stood by the window instead, looking down at the floor below, at the patterns he had built over years of precision and certainty. People moved exactly as expected. Deals closed. Hand replayed. Outcomes unfolded. Everything looked the same. But it was not, because now he could see the edges, the small inconsistencies, the moments where behavior did not align perfectly with prediction. Before, he would have dismissed them, adjusted the system, reinforced control. Now he observed. That was the difference. Sir, the voice behind him was careful, measured, waiting for instruction. Adrian did not turn right away. Leave it, he said quietly. The man hesitated. The table, the funds, Adrian shook his head once. Leave it, not because it did not matter, but because it no longer defined the moment. Silence followed. Then footsteps retreated, leaving him alone with something unfamiliar. Not loss, not defeat, perspective. Adrian's gaze remained on the floor below, but his focus was elsewhere entirely. She did not take it, he said, more to himself than anyone else. Not confusion, not disbelief, recognition. That detail mattered more than the outcome itself. Money had always been a tool, a measure, a way to control variables. But Naomi Carter had stepped into that structure and refused to interact with it the way everyone else did. She had not rejected the game. She had simply refused to let it define her. That was new. Adrian exhaled slowly, his reflection faint against the glass in front of him. For the first time in years, he was not thinking about the next move. He was thinking about the space between moves, the part of the system that had never needed attention. Until now, down on the street, I kept walking, the sound of the city blending into something steady and constant. No pressure, no expectation, just movement. I did not think about the table, or the money, or the man who had built a world around certainty. I thought about patterns, and how easily they could become invisible when no one questioned them. Tonight, I had not broken anything. I had simply looked closely enough to see what was already there. And somewhere behind me, a man who ruled an entire city had done something far more difficult than winning. He had paused. He had listened. And in that quiet, almost imperceptible moment, he had changed. He ruled the city. But that night, he learned something no system could calculate. Control is not proven by never losing. It is proven by knowing what to do when you finally do.